Good morning, comrade. You're listening to WHIVLP New Orleans 102.3. This is our weekly Good Morning Comrade. Today, we have a very special guest, friend of the show, like longtime buddy, actually. I haven't seen you in person since 2019, but yeah, we have Andrew P. Andrew Porter. What's going on, my dude?
Ain't much. How are you doing, Jeff?
I'm good. I don't remember whose house it was, but it was during the Chicago strike in 2019. I don't know whose house it was. But we were like hanging
Yeah,
out, drinking Malort. It was awesome. It was a good time.
it was
That
fun.
was my first time ever having Malort, by the way, which I quite enjoyed. Many people talk trash about Malort, but like I don't know, it's fine. I got no problem with it.
I really don't like licorice, so it's like firmly in the land of things I don't enjoy. But I I get it as the bit. Like I
Yeah,
understand
it's such a Chicago thing.
yeah.
And I know that we do have a couple of absinthe bars in New Orleans, like, and that's sort of. I mean, it's obviously not exactly the same. And actually, Black Penny, in New Orleans, in the French Quarter, right on Rampart Street. I was just hanging out one day, and the bartender's like, "I'm from Chicago. I have some Malort." I'm like, "Okay, what the hell? Sure." Like giving us free Malort. I'm like, "Hell yeah!" You
That
know,
is the way it should be drinking.
for free.
Yeah.
Anyway, yeah, you are running for the National Political Committee of the Democratic Socialists of America. Folks might have seen our previous conversations that we've had with folks from the Social Security Caucus and Groundwork. I know that you've been a longtime member of Bread and Roses, and now you're running for NPC. You want to sort of start that off, kick it off?
Yeah, no. So I've been a member of Bread and Roses since the inception. I'm running for NPC this year for a few reasons. One, I think I'm really excited about how far DSA has come since I joined. I joined back in 2006, so it's been a long time, and I've seen it grow immensely. I really want to be involved in helping that continue. Our labor work has improved immensely, electoral work, but I still think there are things that we can definitely improve on. One of them that I think is really important is amping up like the internal political education that we do, and also providing more support to the youth section as well. I think those are two ways that are going to be really important for once people join, making sure that they become socialists and like maintain that perspective. Which I think is one of the things that we haven't done quite as well in DSA as as recruiting people and like training on some of like the mechanical aspects of organizing.
Mhm. Yeah, so that is, I mean, the mechanical aspects of organized. Can you like get into that a little bit, just sort of like what you mean? Because I know what you're talking about, just for the benefit of our audience. I mean, like people sort of like have this sort of abstract idea of what organizing is, but I mean, you and I both know. I mean, we both come from the union world, and there is a very specific, well, and very very involved process that goes with it, and sort of we could talk a little maybe a little bit about that and how it applies to an organization like DSA.
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, when I'm talking about mechanical aspects, what I mean is like being able to, canvas, being able to phone bank, knowing how to cut a list, knowing how to have an organizing conversation with someone. And these are really important skills. Like if you don't know how to do this, it's going to be very difficult to, run a campaign, move things forward. But my first job out of school, I worked at like one of the offshoots of the Pergs, and they were also great at teaching you all of this, but there were no politics connected to it.
Mm-hmm.
So we need to make sure that like the politics remain, and they're just as important as like being able to know what to say once you're in front of someone at the door.
Sure, and so that's sort of the core, I guess, of what we're running for NPC for, and as well as the folks that you are running with. Yes.
Yeah, that would be one of the things that I want to focus on. Yeah.
Cool. And so I guess to sort of like kick us off, what is when you look at so the DSA convention is coming up in just a couple of weeks. I just like looked at the calendar. I'm like, oh my god, uh, it really is coming up. I've been a delegate to it in the past, not this time. I'm not involved in any caucuses in DSA. Been there, done that, never doing it again. But like, what are those sorts of things that, like, when you are looking at convention and the folks that you are working with are looking at convention, what are your sort of priorities when you see convention coming up? Because there's really high stakes right now, considering the sort of like, I mean, the working class is essentially under siege from the ruling class and the president who is just basically attacking not only immigrants and people who people's First Amendment free speech rights and things like that, but also there are sort of a couple of opportunities and things to look forward to when you see something like I mean, even just a few years ago, the stand-up strike from UAW, or Zoran Mamdani's immense popularity and victory in the primary in New York City. When you see all this happening, how do you look at that and sort like, okay, how does an organization like DSA plug into it?
Yeah, I mean that's the big question. So I think there
I asked the big questions here. Okay,
I appreciate it. There are a few things there. So one, I do, DSA as a whole. I think one of the important things coming out of convention is, I don't know if we're not going to solve this next weekend entirely, but I think we'll have some idea about how we orient towards the Trump administration. Because it's not going to be a settled question until he's gone, but it's something we need to really discuss and work through. And there are going to be different answers as we go around, but like right now, in terms of like my thinking and kind of where Bread and Roses are at, is we're stuck in a really tough position because on one hand, we don't have the organizational and kind of like left strength in order to really fight back coherently against them. The closest thing we have to an opposition party is the Democrats, and they are doing a terrible job, and they're not set up to do a good job. Like, they're set up as a party for capitalism, and so like they're not really going to fight for the working class. Yeah. So we're kind of in this tough part where we need to figure out how to resist on the ground where we can, on the particular issues that we can, while at the same time knowing that this isn't the final battle. We need to still be building up all of the infrastructure that we need further down the line. So continuing to build the labor movement even while it's under attack. Continuing to build social society, continuing to build more democratic institutions, all these sorts of things that we can work on, that we need to have in order to continue to fight capitalism. Because while we resist Trump in the meantime, we can't forget that, like, theoretically he's going to be gone in 4 years, and something, who knows what there'll be, who knows like what's coming next, but it's not going to be socialism. So we need to like continue to build up the movement so that we can continue to fight for a better world.
Yeah, that's one of the sort of key things that I think that is kind of like one of the bigger questions that exists within DSA right now, is how does and it's not 100% this or that, I don't think, but there is a sort of like really important nexus that a lot of this organization currently rests upon, which is internal focus towards sort of like how the DSA will orient itself among the sort of like American left, which is in my opinion quite small and not particularly powerful, and how and that's sort of like juxtaposed against the orientation of how do we organize the broader working class, and how do we build an organization of people and sort of develop people into that sort of that analysis. And again, I want to say that these two things are not entirely in conflict with one another, but there is sort of it's a major point of contention within the organization how that's going to be processed, I suppose, and refined.
Yeah, absolutely. And I think there are definitely people on, like, there's some people in the organization that see basically anything that we're doing internally or any sort of political discussion internally as distracting from the work and slowing us down, which I think isn't helpful. There are other people who are too focused on like making sure we have the perfect line, and that also isn't helpful. you know, it's a tough thing to kind of like navigate, because on one hand, if we're not having these internal political conversations, we're not really going to be able to orient ourselves into what we want to do. You know, one of the reasons we saw DSA grow the way we did is because there were new ideas around how to use the ballot line. Like, you know, the Ackerman piece about, you know, how to use the ballot line really changed people's thinking in terms of, yeah, we can run people on the Democratic line, but, you know, we're going to use that not only as a way to win, but as an agitational method. You know, the dirty break idea came out of that as well. So, you know, these were new ideas that kind of helped inform our strategy. So it is really important that we do that. And I think the other side of that is also like, one of the reasons we've seen so much tension and kind of disorganization around electeds sometimes taking positions that they do is internally, like, we never had the conversation of like, what are the things that we don't want them to do. So like every time this happens, it blows up because we never actually made these sorts of decisions. You know, I like, AOC is the biggest example, of course, right now. And
Everybody's saying, right?
Yep. And I mean, like, I think one of the things that becomes so exhausting about this is like we have the same fight every single
over
time,
and over
because
again. Always,
you know,
on Twitter or the forums or whatever, like the
and
least human interaction,
yeah,
like media for this.
And, you know, I think there's always going to be, like, whenever you have electeds, like, there's always going to be criticism of what they do. But I think the crisis moments happen because, like, we never internally really decided on what does it mean to be a DSA elected? Like, what are some red lines for the organization? Because even the people who say there shouldn't be red lines, like, no, there's red lines. Like, there are things that if AOC did, even like the hardest DSA AOC stand would say, like, this is beyond the pale. Like,
right.
Everyone has those. It's just where we set them.
And how you operate when those things take place. Like a lot of people are saying, sorry, I mean, entirely
no, go for it.
Like, there are people in the organization, or, you know, adjacent to the organization perhaps, that will say like, well, that's it, time to cut, you know, AOC off entirely from everything. And that comes up like, God, it seems like every 6 months or more frequently than that. And when she does something like vote for, you know, Iron Dome funding, which is or vote against a measure that would God, I hate Congress, but like vote against a measure that would you know, defund the Iron Dome, or at least like stop American dollars from going to the Iron Dome, that, you know, somebody who's horrible and like acting probably in bad faith, or the good faith they're acting is more towards a nativist, I guess, perspective, which is not Marjorie Taylor Greene. Like you still got to vote for, like, against the Iron Dome funding, even if it's, you know, the one of the most odious people that are putting forward, because you can't get, you know, politically even speaking, you can't let her run rings around you. Like, you're a freaking idiot. But like at the same time, you know, like, what is the response supposed to be? Because there are obviously people that are, you know, in DSA or that are adjacent to DSA that are like, well, that's it, time to cut her off again, you know, which is like the 27th time they've said this exact same thing.
Yeah. And I mean, I think this also really shows kind of the deficiencies of, you know, the AOC was like was a surprise when it happened. Like, I think people, you know, her winning in the primary was a surprise. DSA was still kind of, you know, coming into its own. So we didn't really have a good way of setting up kind of how to work with, you know, electeds, how to coordinate any of those things. And, you know, I think that's shown. Like, I think in a lot of ways, AOC probably views us as another coalition partner. Maybe, you know, as an organization she's a part of, but not any higher or lower priority than like some other organization. You know, which makes sense for her. But if our political project and our electoral project is more than just trying to, you know, kind of like pass the best bill possible, then having someone who, you know, isn't engaging with us in a way to move that project forward, you know, it creates problems for us. So, you know, I think this is partly born out of we weren't ready for kind of like having a congressperson, and like we've had to kind of keep making it up as we go. And
I mean, not even just AOC, but like somebody like Jamal Bowman, which was like, God, that I think everybody in DSA who pays attention to national stuff like simultaneously had an aneurysm and just like decided like, oh, you know what, it's time to just fight and like endlessly about this guy. You know what I mean? And instead of trying to process, like trying to develop a strategy, it's just like how do we lay down the law on whatever perspective that you're taking on this?
Yeah, and I mean, like I don't think the sort of idea of the way we get elected in line and the way like we work the project is, kind of focusing on censure, focusing on, trying to kick people out.
Discipline, right?
Yeah, exactly. Like I think that can definitely be there, but like the point of it, like the beginning of it, is we need to be working together and like agreeing on what we're doing. I think one of the things that there are definitely a lot of criticisms and critiques of like the New York sort of social office model, but when it works best, it is, the electeds working together with the chapter in order to coordinate, towards political goals. You have people voting in blocks, you have people endorsing each other. Like that's when it's working best.
You got to establish a relationship. I mean, that's just that simple. You can't just be the person throwing rocks at the windows and throwing tomatoes at the elected. I mean, if that's the only way you're gonna operate, then you're gonna be treated not like a potential ally, but as purely a nuisance.
Yeah, and I mean, I think that definitely. I think there's some, I can't see inside of her head, but like I can understand the sort of negative polarization that could have occurred with some of the online stuff. But, the other side of it is, I don't think that AOC has been interested in like sort of creating a relationship as the organization has.
No,
it's led to this really imbalanced thing.
Yeah, it's giving an opportunity to essentially jettison the relationship with DSA, which doesn't benefit DSA unless you have a perspective that involves not engaging with elected officials. I mean, unless they fit almost sort of like entirely into your kind of ideological like box there, right?
Yeah, I mean, I'm more agnostic on kind of like whether or not AOC should stick around. I mean, the stuff around Palestine has definitely been, I think, the worst like she's ever been. Going on like, the DNC and saying that they're fighting tirelessly for a ceasefire, and with the Marjorie Taylor Greene vote, then afterwards talking about how, she voted for defensive weapons, not offensive weapons, but you're giving weapons to a state that you agree is committing genocide. Like, why are you giving them anything? Like, you should, that's kind of crazy.
Yeah, it's ridiculous.
So that's, I mean, I think she's, kind of been at her worst during this period. And, I'm sympathetic to the people who, feel like those are red lines because, it's understandable. I think it's also just like at a certain point, I think it's more likely that AOC is just going to walk away from us. And, maybe that's for the best, maybe not, but we'll kind of see what happens down the line.
Yeah, it's funny, and this is gonna be the last point on this, but like it's funny because she's sort of been the opposite, like the photo negative of Bernie Sanders, because like her rhetoric on this sometimes, except for the DNC comment, has been like at least calling it a genocide. Like it's been generally like somewhat good. I mean, obviously there are people online that would argue with me with that, but I think it's been probably, as far as Congress goes, better than most. And then when it comes to the policy side of it, she's been terrible. And on the other side, you have Bernie, whose rhetoric is awful, and he's putting forward bills to like stop all bombs from going to Israel. It's just like makes you want to pull your hair out sometimes, Yeah,
it's and like. Like Bernie is definitely 100% wrong on the rhetoric, but at least it makes a little more sense. Like his age, coming out of like the milieu he came out of. Like, I get it, because I've known people like being in DSA and like being on the left that long. Like I've known people that are like that, and like you can understand it. They're not right, but you can understand where they're coming from. But
it's just a strain that comes from. Like he's not on his own in that.
No. So, but yeah, like he does realize like what needs to be done at the same time, which is crazy.
There you go, get some sounds of the city.
Yeah.
Well, this is moving forward. I guess looking forward to, I guess, some of the priorities that you and your folks have in the upcoming convention. Y'all have a set of proposals that y'all are putting forward. Do you want to talk about that a bit?
Yeah, absolutely. So, one that I'm excited about is workers deserve more forever. So last convention, there was a resolution for the basically to create a program for DSA, with the idea being that the platform that currently exists is this super long laundry list of kind of every position we could really ever take. It's not very informative of kind of like what we would do as an organization, like if we have power. And also it's really reflective of, the time it was created, and it's so long that it's like contradictory. So Workers Deserve More was the program that was created, which focused kind of more on a sort of shorter term, this is what we would do, like if we were able to take power. The idea with the current resolution is, one, this would kind of fix it as the program for the time being. It would create a committee to update it, to make sure that it stays up to date, and then also develop materials for political education for both internal DSA and then outward as well. So we could put forward, we can push like, look, this is what we want to do. I think that's important for a few things. Like one, having people in DSA being able to fluently talk about what the program is useful for kind of creating a shared agreement about where the organization is at, what we want to do. It gives us a good way to talk to people. And then it also, I think, very clearly separates us from the Democrats as well.
Mm-hmm.
I think one of the really important things at this point is for us to show that there's a difference between where DSA is and where the socialist movement is and where the Democrats are. I think that'll be really helpful in that. So that's one thing that I'm excited about. Another one is, Sean Fain put forward the idea of like, big strike kind of.
He's the general president of United Auto Workers, but
Yes.
He was a leader of the stand-up strike against the Big Three that took place just last year. Was it last? No, it was 2 years ago.
2 years ago, yeah.
Yeah, that's right. Gosh, time flies. But yeah, anyway, I'm sorry, didn't mean to interrupt. Just wanted to.
No, I appreciate it. So he put forward the idea of kind of like a general strike on May Day in 2028. So we've got a resolution talking about building up towards that day. Luckily there's some time in between then and now. And it's partly about kind of like, how do we build towards this, big event that we can possibly do, lining up contracts, educating, our coworkers, talking to people about this. But, also just kind of gives us a way to begin planning for it now, rather than worrying about it in the week before, which is sometimes, unfortunately, how the organization operates. Let's see. One of the other ones,
Unite Labor and Left is a really good one too. I mean, do you want to talk about that? I mean, this was a collaboration with one of the other caucuses. Do you want to talk about that?
Yeah. So this was a collaboration with Groundwork, with the idea being that we want to run socialists for president. Partly, it's about bringing together labor groups, as well as like DSA and hopefully other organizations as well, to back someone to run for president in 2028. Whether that person, we want to run them in the Democratic primary, because that's kind of where they're going to get the most eyes. And it's to put forward like an explicitly socialist perspective, and ideally one that's backed by labor as well. One step of this that is interesting is this convention. We've invited a bunch of unions, other organizations to be at convention, partly to see what's happening, and also to like try to cohere and build relationships as well. So I think this is hopefully like another way that we can continue to build those alliances.
It's not the first time either that we've had labor present at convention. I remember it was what year was it that Sarah Nelson gave a absolutely amazing speech at
that was 2019 in Atlanta.
Yeah, she said the solidarity is a force stronger than gravity, and I was just like, yes, let's go.
Yeah, she was awesome. I think this year the keynote is Rashida Tlaib, which is
another banger.
Exciting.
It's gonna be a banger. Yeah. She's like, I don't know, there's just something about her. I mean, remember when she had first gotten sort of brought in and like sworn in Congress or whatever, and she just like said I will uphold this oath or whatever, and let's impeach the MFer. I'm like, and she's been one of the most like solid folks on Palestine as well, and she's a longtime DSA member. Yes.
Yeah, and she's actually, I think that is kind of like an example, like a counterexample somewhat to AOC of like, she is a member of Detroit's DSA, like she, is in communication with the chapter. So there is much more of like a direct connection between the chapter and, the elected. She was even at the convention recently, at their convention, like not only just to like, be the congressperson in the talk, but also, she was voting as a member as well. So was actually engaged in the life of the chapter, which was really exciting. So yeah. One of the other ones that is personally just exciting for me is the proposal to launch a member-led design committee. So I've back in 2014, 2015, there was the creation of the Left Caucus, which was the first kind of real caucus in DSA since I don't know, possibly ever. But it was a bunch of people who had either come out of the youth section or were new to the organization and wanted to like see it grow, make improvements. Kind of the platform that the caucus went into the 2015 convention was a few things. Like it was around endorsing the BDS committee, getting rid of the honorary co-chairs. There was one other one, but then one of the ones that we did have was having a coherent graphic design, for the organization.
A style guide.
Yes, that one didn't pass. So like, hopefully we're able to finish the work and finally, put the Left Caucus to bed.
Yeah, and if you remember, like in 2017 when DSA exploded, and shortly after that, there was just like everybody and their mama was making a DSA like chapter logo or whatever, and they were all over the place when it came to style.
We also got super lucky because like we had literally just updated the website like a couple years before that. I don't know if you've ever seen the old one, but it was real bad.
Like DSA.angelfire.com or something.
The YDS, the U section one looked like it was Angel Fire. Like it was black background, lime green type, kind of thing. The DSA itself just looked like it was made back when you first made a website, and then never changed.
Like a lot of union locals have that website still.
Yeah. So we got lucky that we get updated, and that was a giant fight in the organization because like
to update the web. I love that. That's
yeah.
I love that.
Partly,
I remember one time when I was with the teachers union in Louisiana, and like I was just sort of like, hey guys, let me just do something to the website. And they were like, I was on the executive board, and I'm just like, I'll just take up this work. I don't care, like whatever. And it was just like impossible, like to get anybody to say yes to it. It was crazy.
Yeah, I mean, it was like we had one guy who was able to do it, and like he was resistant, and then you had another group that was resistant because one of us had used the word branding when we talked about it. So it's like, well, branding, that's not socialist. We don't need to worry about that. It's like, I don't disagree with you, but if someone comes onto the website and it looks like it hasn't been updated since 1990, they're going to assume we don't exist anymore. Yeah, this is something that you need to do.
Like there's some kind of credibility in having like a crappy old website. Like we're not giving it times, man. It's like it's very 90s, like a 90s brain sort of thing. You know what I mean?
Yeah. There's also a time and place for that, like unionjobs.com. They never need to update. Like it is exactly what it says it is. You can find everything you want on there, but For us, it needed a little improvement.
A little facelift, yeah.
Yeah.
You are listening to WHW New Orleans 102.3. This is Good Morning Comrade. Andrew P. is joining us on the program. We were talking about the upcoming DSA convention, and he is a candidate for the Bread and Roses Caucus for the National Political Committee of DSA. We're talking a little bit about the program that is that caucus has as far as the convention goes forward. We talked about a couple of the resolutions that they're pushing for. Do you want to talk about any others? We talked about workers is over more. We talked about working class leadership. We talked about Unite the Labor and Left. Are there any others that you wanted to sort of mention, or we can move on the design committee? Your favorite.
Yeah. So I mean, like there is for working class leadership. One of the things that we've like Bread and Roses has been really pushing for a while, and last convention we put forward the paid co-chairs that went through. There were also stipends that we had pushed for. When the budget crisis hit, those were gotten rid of, understandably. And so we've brought forward a resolution around stipends. It doesn't say exactly when they would go into effect, but the idea that we want to put forward and like really believe in is that we want leadership to be available to anyone, partly by making sure that if people are able to get some stipends, or if you have paid leadership, then people are able to dedicate more time. They're actually able to focus entirely on the project, which would be really good. And like the little bit, one of the things that we've seen is like this was rolled out to YDSA, and it made a huge difference. Like it wasn't a lot of money, but it made a huge difference in the amount of time that students were able to dedicate to organizing and to working together. So I think at the NPC level, it would be good. I don't think we need stipends for every single NPC member, but I think there are some things that it would definitely make sense for, like the person who is the secretary and keeping all the meeting minutes. That's a big job.
That's a lot of work.
Exactly. Yeah. So it would make sense for that person. Some of the commissions, like the National Labor Commission, National Electoral Commission, if we had paid leadership there, we'd have people who are able to dedicate a lot more time to the project, which would be exciting. And also, it's like something kind of a principle that we believe in, so we wanted to bring it back.
Get paid for the labor that you do, even if it's for an organization that you believe in. Like you might have to take time off of work. You might have to do. You might have to make sacrifices on the sort of your day job end or whatever. And even if that wasn't the case, you should still if you're going to do labor, you should be compensated for that, and more, and not just to say that like in more like the work that you're doing isn't valuable, and like the socialist movement and a lot of the labor movement is built on volunteer work, but essentially like when it comes to taking so much of your time, it does have to make at least a little bit of sense.
Yeah, no, and there are people who are going to be barred, from being able to spend that amount of time if there isn't,
correct,
if they can't get paid. So like we want to make sure that those people aren't barred from leadership. So that's another one. There is the staff relationship question. So the idea being that we kind of want to better define like what is the role of staff in DSA. I think one of the things that has been really pushed for a while is the idea that staff is this sort of apolitical, kind of people who just do like the nuts and bolts of things. And, the resolution is partly about like, look, the staff isn't apolitical, like they can't be, they're people. Most of them are members of DSA. So like, how do we deal with that without, one, we don't want to, stop staff from saying things, like stop them from having a union, organizing, but how do we actually acknowledge the fact that they are political people and like a political entity within DSA, and kind of puts more power in the NPC's hands in terms of like directing staff, kind of making it, because those decisions are also political, like where do staff spending its time on, these are political questions. So like moving a little more of that power over to the NPC so they can better direct, like, this is, the political direction we're taking. So this is what staff should be working on.
I have a follow up on that, just so that, like, I don't want to. There has been some controversy around the role of staff, like over the past several years. There was a controversy where many of the staff were laid off due to the budget crisis that happened a few years ago, and the DSA staff union was a part of that discussion. Has the DSA staff union had any kind of a comment on this? Are they supportive of this?
I haven't seen them make any comment either way. So I think we'll have to see. But yeah, I haven't seen them like address it.
Yeah, I can see it going both ways, and like I don't want to speculate, but I can definitely see it going a couple of different ways. Be it they don't want to have that be those parameters defined, or that it would be clarifying for them to define those parameters and make it more clear what they should and shouldn't be doing, and what is and what isn't appropriate. I'm just curious as to and that's a different conversation for a different time. But I'm not trying to like pit you. And I don't know the staff union position on this, so
as far as I know, there isn't one. I think the other part of it is like the resolution would also encourage DSA to hire DSA members from within and like people who have been involved in DSA. Because we've seen, I think most recently there was discussion around a few different staff positions, and people from outside the organization were brought in versus internal candidates who had a lot more connection, kind of like knew the organization better. So I think, it makes sense to me that like if people who are in the organization are going to be better at being staff because they understand the dynamics a lot more than someone like we're bringing in from outside.
And just as a personal note, like I could just say that all of the best staff that I've ever interacted with have all been from the membership. And I don't want to shout out names because I don't want to put them on the spot, but if you're listening and you're one of those folks, who you are, like the best, like chef's kiss, like just dedicated to the work that they do and dedicated to the organization. I just wanted to throw that part out there.
Yeah, absolutely.
Anything else on the proposals, or do you want to sort of get into maybe some of the folks that are running with you, or anything else that you wanted to kind of get to?
Let's talk about the other people on the slate.
Sure. Who we got? What's the lineup?
Well, first
you're starting 5 in the bench.
We're Alex P from New York is running for co-chair. So there are only 3 people running for co-chair right now. It's Ashik from Groundwork, Megan from Breadstar, and then Alex. Ashik and Megan are returning. They were the co-chairs for the last 2 years. The part
Can
of the
you
reason
talk about what the role of co-chair is?
Yeah.
All right, just so that because this is something that is not always necessarily clear to especially our radio audience.
Yeah, so I mean, like, co-chairs were passed the last convention. The idea being that, we wanted people who were paid in order to spend most of their time promoting DSA, kind of being the outward faces of the organization, and partly, do internal work, but a lot of it, we hoped would be kind of spreading what DSA is about, appearing publicly, doing a lot of those kind of things, because one of the issues that we had, during kind of Bernie and post Bernie is, our national director was doing, was focused entirely internally, which made sense because we had an organization to run. There were a lot of things that were being decided, and we didn't have like really people who were people representing DSA that were out there kind of like talking for the organization, or kind of being able to go on various media platforms and spread the ideas. So part of this was like, okay, so let's set aside these roles in order to focus on that. And part of the reason Alex is running is I think the co-chairs, it's the first time we've ever done it. I think they did a decent job, but if you look at kind of the amount of kind of outward facing work that they've done, it's a lot lower than what we envisioned the role would be. So Alex is really committed to making sure that that the co-chair is like as outward facing as possible, that we're using this to communicate to people, to bring DSA to more people, and to make sure that like our ideas are out there as much as possible. So I think that's one of the really exciting things.
So sort of a public face of the organization is what you're
Yeah.
saying, just sort of outward facing, because I mean, again, in the sort of intervening 2 years, that executive director that you mentioned has hence resigned from the position. So that crutch can't exist anymore. They can no longer be the face of the organization in the same way. So that means it's on either whoever replaces her, or I would prefer. Nothing against Maria. I think she was amazing for a long time. I hope that's not a hot take, but regardless, I would prefer if that person was elected by the membership or the convention, and that's another one we can maybe get into in a little bit, the one member, one vote, but maybe not. Maybe we don't want to talk about that, but I know it's we can talk about that after this, but yeah. I suffice to say, however this person is selected, be it by the convention or by the membership more broadly, it's a good thing to have that person be chosen by one of those two things.
Yeah, absolutely. And like
person or people, I should say.
Yeah. And like Michael, who is like the current, he's kind of doing the national director job, but isn't the national director, but it's kind of like performing that. He's been doing he does awesome work. But I agree with you that like the person we want to be the public face of the organization should be an elected position and someone that the organization has voted on. Because I think that's one sort of different responsibility than kind of doing the internal management of the organization versus kind of like putting the ideas forward. Mm-hmm. So Alex is running for co-chair. I'm really excited about that. We've got Haley, who is another person that's running for NPC. She actually was DSA staff as well. So I think we have 3 people running who are DSA staff at one point. Myself, I was the youth organizer back in 2010 to 2012. Haley was a regional organizer. So she worked there. She's currently a staffer for a union. So she's worked a lot with unions. She's done some really exciting electoral work as well. And so, yeah, I think she's going to be really great. I've gotten to know her more over the campaign. Her analysis is like spot on. She's really good at keeping people on task, which is always helpful. Then
being a union organizer will do that, right?
Yeah. No, it does help. Then we've got Serena, who is from Texas. She's a nurse as well. She works in the ER, and she's done a lot of work around Palestine. Houston has a surprise. I didn't know this kind of before, but like has a surprisingly large Palestinian community. So there's been a lot of work that she's been doing down there.
Austin does?
No, Houston.
Oh, Houston. I beg your pardon.
Yeah, no. It was surprising for me.
Yeah.
So not only is she like a rank and file union member, but she's done a lot with Palestine. She came in through the youth section, so she knows YDSA as well. So that's really exciting. Ella, who is she was in San Francisco and East Bay DSA. She was actually like the first East Bay staffer. So she was like local staff. She's worked with, then she was like the co-chair for a while. She's a librarian. So again, another rank and file union member. And she's done a lot with electoral. She's done a lot with political education. She's done a lot with like just managing and kind of running a chapter. So she knows kind of the nuts and bolts of how to do things. So I think we've got a really exciting slate this year. Who not only I think like politically, are on the ball and like have good ideas, but then also have kind of proven themselves as being able to, run the things that they're in charge of, which is important.
Yeah, being able to do the job that you're elected for is super important, I would say. You are listening to WHIVLP New Orleans 102.3. This is Good Morning Comrade. Jeff, joined by Andrew P. He is running for the one of the sorry, not co-chair, but for the National Political Committee of the Democratic Socialists of America. We're talking a little bit about convention and sort of what's at stake and what are some of the priorities that someone from his perspective sees. Just to sort of like sorry, I got to drop the hot matzo ball here, but the one member, one vote thing, it is essentially. Can you outline in your view what this fairly controversial resolution put forward by another caucus, and sorry to make a comment on another caucus's deal, but also but there's so much discussion around that, and I feel it's very, very consequential, not a resolution, a constitutional amendment, and why, like what just can you describe it first, and then we could sort of get into the pluses and minuses of it.
Yeah, so I think there are a couple. So one of the things about one member, one vote is they're like different sections of it. So there's the one of them where it would be one member, one vote. So everyone in DSA would vote on the National Political Committee, would vote on the co-chair, which would change it from the way it currently is, where the convention votes on these positions. There's a one member, one vote around national endorsements. So the entire organization would vote on national endorsements, and those are the two biggest ones.
They're two separate amendments, or they're two
different resolutions? Because like the one for the NPC is a constitutional amendment, and then the other one is a resolution.
Gotcha.
Because there's nothing in the Constitution about how we do endorsements.
Sure. That's a very important distinction. I'll just say that.
Yeah. So, I think the logic behind it is sound, and I think the problem that they're trying to solve is important, in that the connection between national DSA and a lot of people in chapters isn't very strong. Either people don't know what's happening in national, they just ignore it, or they feel it doesn't matter at all, and so they just they're disconnected. And if the point of having a national organization is that we are working together, we're uniting these struggles. It's not helpful if no one pays attention to what national is doing.
And just to put a point on that, I mean, like, again, I've been a member of two different chapters, and I've also been involved at various points with, at least I've been a delegate to convention. I've also been attempted in two different states to build sort of a statewide organization, and the difference between chapters is, like, you would be gobsmacked. And one of the things that I constantly, like, it drives me nuts, quite frankly, but we'll have like a march or something happening, sort of like the big Palestine march that happened in Washington, D.C., or even things that happen a little bit more locally. And like there is no singular DSA banner. It's just a bunch of like locals marching by themselves. And I'm just like, why the hell does where's the sort of like internal organizational, like basic, like walking behind one single banner solidarity? Like, what the hell is going on here? You know what I mean?
Yeah, I mean that is a definite problem.
Drives me nuts, Doug. Like seriously.
Yeah. So I mean, in my mind though, the one member, one vote doesn't really fix this. Like I understand the logic behind it, but I don't think it really solves the issue that we're trying to get at. So like for example, the NPC one. I think the NPC kind of constitutional amendment, I don't think that's going to pass, just because it's a much higher threshold than will probably be reached. But I think like with
two-thirds to do a constitutional amendment,
yeah. So I don't think it's going to come anywhere close to that. I think I understand and get kind of the idea behind everyone in the organization should be able to vote for leadership. What I see kind of coming out of the online version of that election is people are going to be like, you're mostly just going to be whipping for the people that or like whipping along caucus lines. One of the values of convention is that you actually get to meet people in person. You do get to actually talk to them. So like people's minds can change. You see how people act on the floor. That definitely changes minds as well. So I think that's, I don't, in people voting online in a leadership election, I don't think really changes the relationship between themselves and national all that much. Like they may be slightly more invested, but I imagine, what I'd be willing to bet will happen is you just have a very low voter turnout, and you'll have like basically the same sort of thing as if we do it in the convention way. In terms of the one member, one vote around national endorsements, I think again, like, you're not solving the problem between people feeling committed and people feeling involved in the decision, and what like DSA is going to do. So, there's been a lot of left parties in Europe that have done a lot of they've done a lot of online referendums. They've done a lot of like online voting in order to try to like bring more people in, and what it hasn't really worked very well. Honestly, like, you have members who are kind of paper members that will vote on things, then you have kind of the leadership, and it really hasn't become a more democratic, more vibrant organization because of this. I think one of the best things about DSA, about the convention, is like, you do have that time to meet people, you do have that time to talk and actually deliberate over issues. And I don't think the online voting really helps with that very much. Like, another thing is, I think Detroit is a good example of kind of where online voting hasn't done what they've desired it to do. So some of the people who are in Detroit DSA will talk about, we will approve these campaigns because no one wants to vote no on something. So you have like these things that are approved, but then it wasn't approved because people really wanted to work on them. It was because, you were sent a link that asked you to vote yes or no on this campaign. And then you end up like not having like the people that are actually committed to doing the work on it. So it doesn't really change the amount of engagement that people have or connection to the work that they've done. So, I mean, in my mind, I don't know how we solve the national problem yet, but a lot of times, like, the local issue with this is, and this does connect to national as well, but it's like, am I actually going to be involved in any of the decision making? Like, if as a member, like, am I going to be involved? Like, can I actually engage in that? Is my work meaningful? Is another really important thing. And, is the chapter or local, like, good to be around? Like, does it have a good culture? Like, these are the things I think that actually bring people in. People are pretty, in a lot of ways, like, people are smart. If they don't see that their work is worthwhile or going to be useful, they're going to spend their time elsewhere. We all have limited time, and like,
there's some lives, obviously.
Yeah, and there are some sickos who would love to sit around for 5 hours, coming to consensus on something. But most people are going to say, like, is this worth it? And unless the answer is yes, like, they're not going to come back. So I think, like, part of how it's worth it is you see that your work is, making a real impact in the world, but also, like, do you get a say in how that work is done? I think one of the values of DSA is that we get to teach democracy. When you go to work, you don't have much to say there. One of the reasons people feel so disconnected from politics is there's no real say in that. And DSA needs to be different. And like, that's one of the important things, and one of the ways that we make it more attractive and like actually keep people around. How we do that is, kind of a process question that we'll need to work on and refine, because there's kind of no one perfect way in order to do decision making, to do democracy. But the important thing is, like, do the people who are there get to deliberate together? Do they get to decide on things, and then do they carry it out? How that looks is going to be different at different times. But I think the one member, one vote is trying to solve an important question and solve an important problem. I just don't think it's the way to do it.
Sure. So just kind of coming down on, coming down to the last 5 minutes of the program, give folks sort of your like last words. Not say your prayers, Wabbit, but like, you know what I mean. Just sort of last sort of case for what you're seeing towards convention, and where can people find more information about about yourself and your slate and your caucus.
Yeah. So if people want to learn more, they can go to breadandrosesdsa.org. There's a page for the convention where we have all the resolutions that we've put forward. It actually doesn't include everything because we had a lot of members that were involved in like the consensus resolutions around labor work and electoral work, and a few other things, but that'll have all the resolutions we're putting forward kind of as a caucus. It'll also have we voted on kind of what resolutions we want to support, which ones we're proposing, so we'll have on there as well. I think this convention is going to be really important. We are, we've got some important like internal questions to answer about how DSA works, but there are a lot of really important political questions that I'm excited that we're getting to talk to as an organization. We'll have a better sense of kind of what is our orientation towards Trump, towards the Democrats, towards labor, and I think we'll have a lot of exciting work to do in the next 2 years coming out of it. But I'm really excited to see where kind of the political pressure points are as well. You can kind of see them already forming around some of the issues, but sometimes some things will surprise you. So I'm excited for that as well.
Yeah. And where can we find information about yourself and also Bread and Roses?
So you go to breadandrosesdsa.org. That's the website that has the Twitter, all the other various social platforms. That has a link to the call, which is the caucus publication. That has info about all the NPC candidates. I'm on Twitter, but I'd never post, so you're gonna see 2 posts a month, and mostly retweets. So I don't.
Twitter sucks now. I mean,
yeah,
it was always been bad for your brain, but it's just it's not even fun bad for your brain anymore.
No, there aren't. It's
like Nazi bad for your brain. It's the worst.
It is. I need to just stop looking at it. But
it's called an addiction, and we all have it, I think.
But yeah, no, that's probably the best place to find more info about us and all that.
Cool. Well, thanks you, Andrew P., for joining us on Good Morning Comrade. You can listen to us every Saturday on WHIVLP New Orleans, anywhere in the world, WHIVFN.org/listen. We will be back shortly with John Lewis. Thank you so much, Andrew.
Thank you. Appreciate it.
All right. Good morning, comrades. You are listening to WHVLP New Orleans 102.3. This is your weekly Good Morning Comrade. We are joined now by John L. and Andrew D., both from the Red Star Caucus, and they are running for the National Political Committee of the Democratic Socialists of America. Haven't seen you in a while, John. It's really good to talk to you again. How you doing, my dude?
Yeah, doing good, doing good. Just trying to stay out of the heat and stay out here. Hope you've been good too.
Man, I was complaining just the other day, just how hot it was in Virginia, just because that's where that's where I'm at right now, and it has been hot. But like I look down there, and I just remember the back home heat ain't nothing like it, my dude. Like the humidity just hits different in New Orleans. I remember when I had first moved up here, and I would hop off the airplane and just like walk out into the onto the place where they would pick you up on a little sort of drive-through area, and like, oh my god, it's like a punch in the face. That humidity, it just like brings you to your knees.
Yeah,
Like what I'm complaining about up here, and it does get hot, but like back home heat don't compare.
it's different, man.
I was gonna say, yeah, y'all are gonna hate me. I was like, I gotta stay warm. It's the coldest summer in San Francisco in decades. It's
Oh,
like
buddy.
60 degrees outside.
I'm gonna kick you off of this show. No.
I'll see you. It's nice being here.
No, but so really quick, John is a long time GMC guest. He was, I think, the last time you were on was after the last convention. Welcome back. And I guess you want to introduce yourself just for the audience.
Yeah, sure. Hey, y'all. Name is John Lewis. Use he, him pronouns. I currently serve on DSA's National Political Committee and the National Steering Committee as their treasurer. Been organizing and living in Louisiana a long time. Been organizing down here. Oh my God. Almost 16 years now. Shout out to the folks who, started teaching me stuff when I was like 18, 19 years old, and just been rolling and rolling and rolling from there. Love it. Can't get enough of it.
Can't get enough of it. And Andrew, welcome. Just sort of introduce yourself to the audience if you don't mind.
Yeah, thank you very much. My name is Andrew. I use he, him pronouns. I'm a member of the San Francisco chapter of DSA, and along with John and other folks running for NPC and the DSA's National Political Committee.
Sure.
Yeah, compared to John, much newer to the game. Excited to be here.
So I guess I've been talking to folks from around DSA, different groups, and trying to get a broad survey of who's what is at stake at this upcoming convention, and what's going on just sort of more broadly. As far as y'all come from the Red Star Caucus, what do you sort of see as the what's going on within the organization, and what do you see as sort of at stake at convention?
Andrew, you want to hop in?
Yeah, sure. I can get us started. I think I think that going into convention, Red Star is looking at DSA in all the different parts of the country and like the national state of the organization. And our analysis is that we need to spend a lot more time and effort investing in chapters and developing chapter organizing, pushing the national organization in a direction that supports chapter organizing and also has much more of a role in connecting chapters and struggles across different local areas, right? So whether that's providing resources, money for chapters like via dues share, but also connecting campaigns together that are working in similar areas, whether it's actually the same campaign or folks that are, we've talked to folks who are working in right to work states across the country, right? And like, what does that mean for your labor organizing when you're in a right to work state versus when you're in a place with a higher union density? And so we think that there's a lot more that the national organization can and should do to build out local chapters as the foundation for our organizing.
Okay, and when it comes to like some of the mechanics of building out local chapters, I was just having a conversation with someone else about how different in each individual chat. God, it drives me nuts to go to even like I was just saying this to somebody else running for NPC. When you have a march or something, or the big Palestine march that took place in DC back, well, there were several, but the one I went to was in November, and they had multiple different chapters marching under multiple different banners, and there was nothing even in this one huge sort of event for all of DSA to rally around. I mean, like, how do you even like, one, build out those chapters so that they have the ability to show up and show out, and then two, how do you align them under this sort of singular banner?
Yeah, I'll follow that, and I'll say too, like, so if you take, like, I'll use what's going on in the Deep South and Gulf Coast right now, right? Like, we're going to have about 6 to 7 new DSA chapters in this area between Louisiana and Alabama in the next probably 6 months. Like, they're
6
already
to 7.
Yes.
That's crazy.
Yes. Yeah. And it's like, but the thing is, a lot of it has come up from like pretty much like what you were talking about there, right? Like direct crossover, like structurally, like communicating and staying in touch horizontally. So like the Alabama and Mississippi chapters, they have amazing, and I want to shout out Jason from Birmingham. They have an amazing chapter mentorship type program going on, where basically like they have a monthly call, they get all of the folks together where they're seeding these new places at, especially in Alabama, and then they talk through things, they talk through issues, they connect, they support each other, and they go forward with it. Like I went up to Jackson, Mississippi and helped them secure the people that they had recruited for their interest meeting to help them get their chapter going. Like it has been a consistent theme of like this kind of crossover overlap of like direct connections between chapters and members to like support each other, and then sharing an idea, sharing in things. And then it just also like, it's like when they're sharing something, like say for instance, when people are sharing stuff about the Pearl River, or when people are sharing stuff about what's going on in like the different areas of their state, or even in our region, like it just, there's a level of like just emotional and social connection too that kind of undergirds that like just really, really gets it. And I think that's one of the things that like can help a whole lot in relation to like building across that cross-lateral organizing. Because I bet you when you went to that march in DC, it was probably like, like y'all from Virginia, the DC chapter, and maybe even one of the other chapters is probably within like a 45 to an hour radius of DC.
Baltimore was there, or like some of the Maryland chapters, and they were all cool. And I was definitely like making my way around to go see everybody, but they weren't all talking to one another. Like, what the hell?
Yeah. And it's like, and I feel like that's the big thing, is like, if we can structurally have it set up to where like we're able to better just directly connect with each other, and also kind of instill that from the jump, then like it'll kind of reduce a bit of the alienation, and also get us a little bit tighter in relation to how we're doing those things. But I feel like that's probably like an incoming thing that we're probably going to see this go around with, like, like I don't want to say we've already passed it, but like we just about passed our all-time members, like total members in good standing. I know as a fact that like if we haven't passed it in this week or the next week or this month of August, it will be passed in September, right? And so like it's a situation now where it's like, how are we handling this new influx of folks? How are we handling this new critical mass? Like we've had like 50 plus chapter applications, which would mean we'd also have our highest number of chapters and OCs at any point in the organization. And so like we're tilting towards this period of growth, towards this interaction of growth. And now it becomes a question of how do we engage with that? How do we build on that? And how do we also hold on to these members and these chapters, unlike, like a couple of years ago? But like that's part of the growing pains.
And I guess sort of like, what is that number? Because I remember, years and years ago, there was a DSA 100K. We never exactly met that number, and unfortunately, there was a sort of a fall off. I don't really want to get into the reasons, behind all that or whatever. That's just sort of like dragging up old stuff. But like, my question, I guess, is what is that number, and how do we get there? What is the number that we would be looking to get to as far as like the new highest that we've ever gotten as far as DSA?
I'll tell you right now, because I literally put it together in a we literally put it together in one of the charts that I believe Andrew actually made that chart. There's a chart that shows it. Go ahead, Andrew.
Yeah, I was gonna say, I think the all-time high, so it's a little bit confusing because we advertise two different numbers. But in terms of actual like members who are current on their dues, I think our all-time highest was somewhere in the 70,000s. And then we used to emphasize this like concept of like constitutional members, which is not just members that are current on their dues, but up to 1 year out of dues. Yeah, lapsed. And so that if you use that number, I think the all-time high was like 80 something, maybe just cracked 90. But I think what John's gonna pull up is like we're like getting up there in terms of like actual current dues are like in the high 60s now.
Okay.
Well, it's looking like. Give me 1 second. I think I just had to pull it up.
Vamp, Andrew, vamp.
Yeah. Do.
Okay, yeah. It hasn't been updated with July yet. We're past it.
Okay,
The
we're past.
highest.
Hell yeah.
Yeah, we're past it. We're past it already.
What's the number?
The number was right around where Andrew said, about 73,000. We're past that. From July alone, we're past that. So we're up
Yeah.
there.
And Jeff, the other thing I'll say is like you were talking about like in the past like what's caused members to leave, and I think that like there are some of it that are like can get into more like contentious like the stuff where people are disagreeing or like other kinds of dysfunction, but a lot of it in our experience and in the research that we've done, like, and also just like from like looking at member like and analyzing member roles as well as talking to chapter leaders, is that most of the time people leave DSA not because they rage quit or like there's some big conflict, but because the vast majority of members join and then don't get engaged, right? They like see some headline, see like, oh, it's cool, like maybe there's a DSA chapter in the area, or do they just like, oh, they see the DSA like the national like social media presence or something, they join, they pay dues, and then they never get plugged in. And then when it like a year later, when it comes to renew dues, they're just like, oh, that was a cool like subscription or a one-time donation I did, right?
I'm not subscribing to that Patreon anymore.
But I mean, yeah, that's like kind of what happens with like I want to say like 80-90+% of members that leave, right, across like all areas and in all contexts. And so like in the past where we've had these huge membership bumps, you can see it like exactly 12 months later, it's like 40% of them leave, and the vast majority of those folks just like never got a phone call from someone, never got plugged in, never got like went to a chapter meeting, right? And I think that is like the task that we have in front of us right now. We have this huge opportunity with so many members coming in, so much more interest in like a resurgent resistance movement to like the Trump administration, as well as like really exciting stuff that DSA has been pushing with like the Zoran campaign, and like actually capitalizing on that, right? Taking advantage of that momentum, and like not just being like, oh, thanks for your donation, thanks for your subscription, your Patreon subscription, and then like I'll see you later. It's like, no, come join us, right? Let's work together and like build those like personal connections that keep people around. Like that is what we got to do to keep it from just like a roller coaster going back down in 12 months.
Mm-hmm. So I just want to draw this conversation to this is all related, obviously, but the 2025 platform that y'all have put out, you have 5 points: build the foundation of Raise the Roof, fighting fascism means fighting the duopoly, a positive vision of socialist internationalism and electoral politics. Organization is our principal task, and new organizing is the lifeblood of our struggle. Do you want to talk about this platform and sort of what that means as far as one, building support for these ideas and these perspectives, and then 2, what does it look like when they're implemented?
Yeah, sure. We'll probably bounce back and forth between the two.
Sure.
Of them.
We don't need to go point by point. We can talk generally, but I do want to hit on all of them if possible.
Yeah. So the first one we kind of talked about a little bit from a high level, and I know Andrew's gonna slide in on this one in a moment too. But like the key thing too is like, especially when it comes to like our growth and development committee. Like if you're familiar with like other like member-based organizations, they may call it a membership committee or something else like that. For us, that's the GDC, that's the growth and development committee. And so we want to be kind of basically continuing to kind of build out the ability for National be that hub of support, hub of resources, hub of trainings, so that way they can build on them, use them, and then continue going forward from there. But also kind of also doing that inversely too, right? Like our good folks from DSK, I always shout out our good folks from Democratic Socialists of Canada. They have a very, very interesting system where like they have a direct flow path of information from national to their from national to chapter to leadership to national too, which is very, very interesting, right? And so like in an example of things, it's kind of like we want to try to build those ties a little bit more, so it's less of like, like I don't understand, I don't care about this or anything else, but more of like, I know it's here. I can engage with it as I so choose to engage with it. It has a space, it has its role and everything else in relation to like how the national organization relates. I'll also throw in a little bit too, like the bit on electoral politics too, right? So like, like we have, beyond just like Zoran, we also have like folks like Willie Burnley, we have Omar Fateh, like we have a lot of folks who are kind of like going through this process where you can see this 2-tier thing of like a lot of our most successful and lasting socialist electeds are people who, especially if it's going for higher offices, have already held a prior office. the three people I just named did. Really, all four of them I just named did previously held an office before going for an even higher office. And they also rooted it in continuing to organize while they were doing it, right? And so all of them have built, especially Rashida's constituency services program, have all, and especially like if you've been following my Donnie stuff, I know you have, but like anybody listening, like you will constantly see him kind of leaving these hooks out there of like a brief description of what socialism is, like a one-liner, right? Or he'll do a thing of like, yeah, I'll tell you about DSA, or like you should join DSA, right? Like
sliding it in there and not lecturing people. It's very important.
Yeah. And so it's like it still leads back into this thing of like, hey, how are we building these folks? How are we like building this movement through it, and a process, a part of it? Like, how is this another tool in the toolbox as they all kind of fit together? And so I wanted to really hit on those two things, because I know Andrew's going to slide in on some others, but I wanted to really hit on those two real quick.
Yeah, and I think to pick up where John left off, like we look at like Red Star in general, not just like for this convention, right? But like it's conveyed in our platform where we look at like the role of electoral organizing this in a very similar way to how we look at labor organizing, tenant organizing, any other kind of like community, like based involvement where like people are talking to other people that they know, right? The goal of it is not like, I mean, we want to win in general. We want to win everything, right? We're trying to change all of society. But the goal is not necessarily each individual election is not like the make or break point, right? Each individual, like November general election is not the make or break point. Each individual union election, right, to like certify a union or like a tenant union, like these are not the make or break points.
They're all opportunities. They're not necessarily
Mm-hmm.
the end of the
yeah.
Mm-hmm.
They're all stepping stones, right? They're all ways to build up support. They're all ways to get people involved. And the thing that matters out of it is the opportunity for members, like, I mean, the current DSA members, future DSA members, just like members of the working class, right? To talk, like gain skills as organizers, right? If you're like, say you're volunteering, you like go learn like, to go canvas for the first time. Like that's something I did with DSA for the first time when I first joined, and like what I do whenever, my chapter has an electoral campaign, right? Going out there, spending your weekends, like talking to strangers about this thing, right? Like you build up that skill, getting more involved with the campaign, like coordinating stuff. Like these are like logistical aspects of that, but then also the political development, right? We don't yet live in a socialist society. So like we're coming in with like the stuff that the garbage that we learn in school and like the other stuff that like the media tells us that are all kind of not quite in touch with reality, not quite in touch with the real root of the problem. And so like the act of participating in DSA and like these like organizing efforts is not just to like develop the tangible skills of like, I know how to work a spreadsheet to find out who to go canvas next. But also like, okay, I now have a better understanding of how the world works, and I have a better understanding of like where the real problems are with capitalism, with imperialism and all that. And so like these different arenas of struggle, electoral, labor, tenant, whatever it is, the goal is like what we're trying to get out of it are those opportunities, right? And like we can engage in those struggles in ways that have more of those opportunities or less of those opportunities. And Red Star is like wants to emphasize ways where like more working class people or average members are like in the driver's seat and have those experiences of like entering into class conflict, entering into struggle with each other, with and like figuring out how to build a better world.
Mm-hmm. On the point of electoral politics and organizing being the principal task, I think that sort of brings up a key question, not just in not in just sort of getting folks elected into political office or whatever, but like when those folks, or even union office or whatever it is, however, I think those are two very significantly different things. There is a question of also like, what does a relationship between our organization and those folks look like? Unfortunately, for the most part, the way what I'm seeing, and maybe it's just a skewed version of it because a lot of this stuff takes place on the forums and social media. The kind of conversation around these sorts of things is largely like disciplinary and not based around building a relationship and sort of like having a dialogue. And I guess the question becomes, because obviously you want to be supportive of the folks that come from our organization when they get in the office, but what do you do when they don't do what you do, and what do you do when they do? Like how do you do that without it being like, oh, AOC did another stupid thing or terrible thing or whatever, and not having it be first step cut off,
Yeah. So I'm a shout out Jesse B from Indianapolis. I love Central Indiana DSAs. Like going in there and sitting down and sitting down with them and hearing them talk about like their plan and like the stuff that they were doing, especially as part of like trying to build socialism in one district, right? Because we are yet to have a single district in this country that is fully like base built socialist, like these people are like looking for like we want to make sure that we are electing a socialist, only a socialist, et cetera, like that type of thing. We haven't gotten to that point just yet, but like their goal of going through the process of working closely with Jesse in the process of building that is kind of like a back and forth and continual thing. Like Jesse showed, like just they're able to communicate with Jesse. Jesse shows up the stuff in relation to the chapter. There's still like a good relationship already built there in relation to in that type of situation, right? And like they're kind of actively building this thing out together. I'll throw another one up to the north, up to the Pacific Northwest, where there's a state assemblyman who is basically also kind of doing a similar thing, where like their socialist in office committee essentially functions as like legislative aides, basically, and they kind of help do the process of carrying information back and forth between the two areas, between the chapter and between the state rep. And so like these things kind of come together, in which like those are what I would say is like model examples of like how this can kind of be built out. And then I go into like some softer examples where like, like there are DSA members who work in just about, I would say probably if not all or a majority or even half of our elected offices, there's more than likely at least one DSA member who's working in their office, which is more of like a still small informal connection there. But the flip side of that, I would say, is that when it comes to the issues of like, okay, well, how do we align around issues of like discipline? How do we align around issues of politics or other things like that? Then I think it comes down into a space of like, right, like every elected that we have is not someone like Omar, Willie, Zoran, Rashida, et cetera, right? Everybody is not one of those folks. And it goes about saying, how do we in turn build a relationship with them if there's somebody that we already have endorsed? And I think the flip side of that is, okay, how can we be in contact with them, their office, and them themselves, right? Like, how do we come in contact with them and talk to them about things and communicate with them? And also, how do we show up in the kind of like, I think about it from a similar method of what I mentioned around one of our good comrades, Sinead Darby. Sinead is an elected over at Delaware. She does a whole bunch of community organizing on top of that. And one of the things I kept thinking about was like, yo, like they could act like they could actually tap in with you too as like just the organizer outside of your elected office, right? And like there's a relationship that can be built there that ways and crossways in relation to that. But when you have someone who is like going into a situation is like, hey, there's something going on, we want to see how we can throw down behind you, what we can do to get the support out, or if you do need assistance in like, hey, I am worried that I would take an electoral hit if I am aligned with our position on this, or I would potentially get pushed out of office, right? So how do I go about squaring these differences, and how can we throw down support behind them to where we can say, hey, you can still take this position and we are going to like roll with you on it, or hey, what are the ways, just like we talked about with Zoran, right? Like Zoran's not going up there and being like, well, the proletariat surplus value is how, like he ain't doing that.
People switch their brain off and they ain't listening no more.
Yeah. Like,
you gotta talk like a human being. You can't be talking like Trotskyist magazine.
yeah. And it's like, so it's like we have those conversations for real, and we can have the shared understandings of like the things that like we're thinking about in relation to it. I would say I always feel like accountability, constructive criticism, they still require you to be in a space where you can actually levy those things. Mm-hmm. And you don't levy those things from like afar. You have to actually like build a relationship with people, talk to them, contact them. So that's what I would say is like the first step in anything, regardless of anything else. That is always supposed to be like your first step in relation to that. And then if you're brushed off, if you're ignored, if you're kind of like left on red and you're reaching out in good faith, then like, like that's a different situation.
Mm-hmm. I was just gonna say like, I think John covered most of the points, but like a lot of the specific things that Jeff, like I think you're referring to, like where people are like really getting into debates of like, oh, like this was bad, this, like denouncing people, that kind of stuff. Like,
yeah, I can't stand it. I'll be quite frank. It just like,
yeah,
like, this is not productive conversation, and it quite frankly makes like especially if you're doing it in the name of the organization, it makes it look like a bunch of freaks. You know what I mean?
Yeah, and I think that like a lot of that stuff is also downstream of like things that weren't built ahead of time, right? Like what John is saying, like having these relationships where like, I mean, not even talking about electeds like our electeds that are outwards facing, just talking about like inside DSA is a big tent, right? We have a lot of different perspectives, a lot of disagreements on things, right? And so like even within DSA, right, you look at like member to member or just like elected leadership of the national or of your chapter or whatever, like there's a role there as leaders to engage in dialogue with the organization, right? Like whatever your personal beliefs are, like you're pushing forward those and balancing that with like, okay, but I'm also tasked with leading and like representing the org, right? Like externally to the outside world and also internally, right? If I'm like talking to the org, like you're not really going to be an effective leader if you're like just out there alienating like half of it. So like I think that a lot of that is built on this like this relationship building that needs to exist, and a lot of that has to happen ahead of time, right? And so like I don't really have a good answer for like what happens if you didn't do that ahead of time. Like in a lot of cases we didn't do that ahead of time because DSA wasn't in a place to do that, or like whatever else, or like we like sometimes I think this is the risk of like endorsing folks that like we don't have this relationship with, not because it's like a purity test, but because in all kinds of organizing we're going to have conflict, right? And conflict itself does not need to be destructive. Conflict is like a place where you can
conflict can be extremely generative when it's being made in good faith and it actually has like positive aspects to that discussion. That's not that's not what I'm talking about.
No, I know that's not what you're talking about, right? But I just mean like the idea that like we are necessarily like both like we're just there's no way to avoid the conflict, and also the conflict I think is good or could be good, right? Like that's how we learn things. If I never like encountered a single hardship in my life, I also wouldn't know anything, right?
Why
like,
would you need to if everything was easy?
Yeah, exactly. And so like so within the organization, but obviously with our organization and like externally facing elected officials, this is also going to come up, and like that's why we need to have a close relationship with our endorsed elected officials, right? And I think that's where like the motivation for having like that ahead of time, like and that like the threshold for endorsing electeds comes from, because we're going to need to have this struggle. This conflict is going to have to come up, and you can't engage in dialogue.
It's inevitable.
Yeah, it's inevitable, and like you can't engage in dialogue if you don't have both sides have to be engaging in the dialogue, right? And so that's the thing that like DSA or like membership or leadership like within DSA needs to engage in like good faith, like come to the table and be like, all right, like we want to discuss this and not just like crash out. But if it's not reciprocal, there's no like there's nothing to do there, right? And so that's I think where a lot of the frustration has come up over the recent years.
You were listening to WHIVLP New Orleans 102.3. This is Good Morning Comrade. Jeff here with Andrew D. and John L. They're both running for the National Political Committee of the Democratic Socialists of America on the Red Star slate. We were talking a bit about their platform, and I don't know if there were any other points that you wanted to bring up on the platform, other on fighting the duopoly or internationalism or anything else that we haven't talked about yet as far as that. But I guess we could talk about internationalism next, and then duopoly.
Yeah, I'll touch on kind of both of them because I mean, like we're saying, all these things are related. But I think that like the internationalism is actually probably the best angle, I think, in our opinion, to get to understand what we're talking about with the duopoly.
I guess the question I have to ask when we do that, what do we mean when we say internationalism? Just to sort of like set the tone on that.
Yes, that's a great question. So I think for Red Star, we are strong anti-imperialists, right? What that means is that in our organizing for socialism, for workers' rights, for liberation, we're looking at not just, most of our organizing happens at the local level. You work with your neighbors, your coworkers, your friends, your family, right? The people that you know to work for, this is a problem in our lives. We're going to work together to improve that. But a big part of like our understanding of the socialist tradition and how we're actually going to be able to win things at a larger scale is that these struggles need to be connected, not just like, okay, my town and your town, or my chapter, your chapter, across states or across the country, but that underpinning all of that is understanding that all across the world, and this is a huge project, but it's like we need to have that be all across the world, right? It can't just be like, okay, like America, like we're all set. We have like Medicare for all, and then we're not going to worry about bombing the Middle East.
Yeah, the F you got mine principle.
Yeah, exactly, right. And I think that runs really deep in our understanding, not just like at the high level of like F you got mine, like we can have wars abroad and still have like good stuff at home, but also understanding like the role that like we play as people, as the working class, as organizers in the center of a US-led like Western imperial project, right? If we look at our comrades abroad, people that are other like self-proclaimed socialists in the global South, in Latin America, South America, Africa, Middle East, Asia, like both the people that are working as socialists, and also anyone that's honestly like anyone that's like even a social democrat, like a liberal, even a capitalist in those countries, right? They are also aligned with us opposing U.S. empire. Like if you want to start a small business in the global South, like your structural like opposition is the same Jeff Bezos, right? Is the same like Elon Musk obliterating your entire economy so that they can have more minerals, and like. So like that's like part of our struggle. That's like I think that shapes how we understand our role here. Not just like, oh, like we need to be working for better wages and like lower rents. We do need to do that, and that is like where we message with people and like how we're like an on ramp for most people, right? I think like we see that success with Zoran, but we can't stop there. We do have to draw that thread all the way through, because without that, it'll just fall apart. Like our actual enemies will just be able to regroup and then take that back from us.
Mm-hmm.
So.
And then on the duopoly piece, anything on that? I mean, it's pretty kind of. I mean, I don't want to say it's self-explanatory, but can you sort of define the whole thing? Like fighting fascism means duopoly, fighting the duopoly.
Yeah, pretty much exactly that, right? Because like if we take it from the consideration that like capital controls both of these parties, and so like whether it's the more progressive wing of it or the more fascist and authoritarian wing of it, you're still going to run into like these aspects that are still playing out, that kind of lends into a more micro level of what Andrew was just talking about. And so like even if you look back at like historical examples, right, like especially like in the South, like you had the Mississippi Freedom Democratic Party, they went forward, they made the challenge, and like you still see like the spin on it from the outcome of that, of like, oh well, like their reaction to this was actually, we need a black political party, right? To what actually happened. That was their reaction to what actually happened. But you'll often see it kind of flipped into, well, like them going up against the racists in the Democratic Party and everything else, and this, that, and the third was like a huge like moment for the Democratic Party. And it's like, well, but the thing is that like that doesn't actually get into like what were the tangible and political outcomes that came from that. Like that was where you got the whole call of, what we want, Black Power. That was what led into, like the Black Panther Party and everything else, right? And so like when we take it from a perspective of like not acknowledging and looking at people who have historically tried to go up against these types of forces and the things that control these spaces, then we kind of like end up in a space where like we're kind of spinning that same wheel, right? And it's like, I'd rather look back, examine how it plays out currently, and then see how these different ways things will come up. So like when it comes to like, and especially when it comes to like issues of like thinking about like ballot lines, other things like that, like it's a topic of convenience. It's a topic of thing, right? Like it kind of goes into like something that Andrew mentioned a bit ago of like, yeah, like social democracy reforms, like pure reformism, not talking about offensive reforms, things that put hands in democracy and control of workers, but like, like just general social democracy, kinder, softer, more progressive capitalism, etc., like still gets away from the end goal of like, we need worker control over the country. You need worker democracy, right? And like, so when you think about it from that perspective, then at base, the goal is we need a workers' party, right? And like how we get there, the tools that we use along the way, we still have to keep that centered of like, we know that like this is still like very, very, very deeply controlled and entrenched, right? Like we would love, like, could you imagine the electoral conditions that we have be like where we could take a party like, say for like a party like Payte can come into existence, go forward, and now have
in Brazil, you mean?
Yeah, Brazil, Payte in Brazil, Partido dos Trabalhadores. That's the Brazilian Workers' Party.
The Brazilian Workers' Party, yes.
Yeah, and for listeners, they started out similar to like DSA is pretty much. And then they grew into that party, ran stuff, did other things. They did work with social movements, all of that. They have the current president of Brazil, Lula, right? Or like you take Moreno, which is a party that was in Mexico that was organized like 11 years ago now, and is now the majoritarian party in Mexico, right? Like we have different electoral conditions here, so we acknowledge the existence of the system we're in, but it's still looking at that end goal. Where do we get workers' power, and how do we get that?
Yeah, because the question for that, for me, I'm sorry, Andrew, I'll the question for me, and maybe we were about to illuminate us on this, but like the structures that we do have, those realities that you mentioned, are very specific and they're very, very rigid. When it comes to the idea of building that workers' party, how do you, what do you do between now and getting to workers' party is my kind of question. Because that's, I mean, everybody in DSA is like, yeah, we need a workers' party or whatever. And it's like, what does that look like? And, I guess if anybody actually knew the total answer to that, our problems would be solved. But like, from your perspective, what do you see as the steps that need to be taken to get there?
Yeah, I think like a big part of I'm not going to pretend like I or any like Red Star, right?
It's the $64 question.
Yeah. It's like, fun fact, I actually had it on my notes app on my phone the whole time. Like, we just gotta, it's like everyone's got to catch up.
I wrote 37 pages on Medium about it or something. Do people even use Medium anymore? Am I dating myself?
Substack, I think.
Yeah, Substack.
Maybe.
There you go.
Yeah. No, but like, I think that, I mean, this dovetails in perfectly, right? Like, the one thing that I think about is like the need for us to spend much more time, not spend, just like keep investing in the organizing at the community level. And this is what like we're talking about with like the orientation for the national DSA organization to be investing in chapter development and like helping chapters not just like develop in like in general. I mean, that is true, but also like help chapters figure out how to set up their own like internal, lively, engaged membership, and have that membership and work be engaged in and deeply rooted in their communities. Because a big part of like wherever we go, however we get, like whatever this party formation looks like, is going to have to involve like us as socialists, as organizers, being deeply rooted in the working class, being deeply rooted in the broad masses of the working people in this country, right? Mm-hmm. And like connected to their communities, understanding the issues, and using that process to also build up an independent political identity, right? Now, there's a separate question, and we can get into like the specifics of like, the electoral, like the ballot line stuff, like, because in the US, like all that stuff is controlled by the state, right? Like you don't really have ballot line control. You can't like prevent someone from being on your ballot line, all this and that, all the thing, right? And I'm happy to get into specifics of that because we can have a really interesting comparison between like I'm here in San Francisco and California. It's like very different, right, from like John in New Orleans or like other parts of the country.
Louisiana's crazy. Louisiana's always been crazy with that kind of stuff. They're fiddling with it now. They did a jungle primary, or they've actually limited the jungle primary on certain specific races. That happened after I left, but like Louisiana's always been crazy with that stuff.
Yeah, and like in San Francisco, a lot of our races
I'm sorry to say, but also it was crazy in such a way that at least locally there was more opportunity than a place like New York, a state like New York, in certain situations, even though it generally benefited the right wing more than it did anybody else.
But no, I think a big part of whatever we do, because there's so many different local conditions, right? Like, and this country is like very like geographically large and like has like these like state level regulations. It's like it involves like carefully understanding what the local conditions are, not just like what the regulations are, but also like what the balance of power looks like in your city, in your state, in your town. What I was going to say is like regardless of how that, like what, whether or not DSA candidates are running on the Democratic ballot line or running as independents or whatever, like it's going to have to involve building up DSA as a strong political, like independent political identity that people that are outside of DSA can understand as a brand. And this isn't just like a marketing thing, but just, so that we stand for things, we're principled over time, right? It's not just like, the winds have shifted and then DSA is like here or there, right? I think that's like a big weakness of like, if you look at what like progressives and like how socialists can distinguish themselves from a generic like liberal progressive or like left progressive brand, is that like progressivism is nebulously defined and also kind of relative to the status quo, right? It's just like, we just like our goal is something 5% better than what we have now. And so it's like whatever we have now, like the goal is just like a little bit better than that, versus like socialism in the long term, like the actual vision like is much more concrete, or at least much less fluctuating, right? So like we stand for like the liberation of Palestine, and that's because we have principles on that. And so like whether or not that's in vogue, that's still something that we advocate for. It's the one thing that like just talking about the duopoly stuff, like I think about the like my analogy for this is like the liberals or like Democrats, right, establishment Democrats, however you want to define that, like spend their time in office loading a gun, and then like eagerly hand it over to Republicans who pull the trigger, and then they just like, oh, and then they like finish pulling the trigger.
If they're not pointing it at their own face and pulling the trigger themselves.
Yeah, exactly, right. And then it's like, oh shit, like the gun is empty, like we gotta reload, and then like hand it back to the Democrats to like build up more consent, put people to sleep, right? Everyone goes out to brunch, the gun gets reloaded, and then like gets handed back. Mm-hmm. And that's like we got to break out of that cycle.
Yeah. And I guess I have agreements and disagreements with some of what you just said. However, I also do want to sort of like ask the question as sort of a follow up. Like when it comes to sort of when it comes to build, like having those principles is extremely important, and I don't disagree with that point. How do you have those principles? And I'm not saying that these things are too diametrically opposed or whatever, but how do you use those principles to meet working class folks where they're at now? And how do you sort of like, how do you sort of create this maybe not understanding is not the right word, but how do you create this sort of like gateway of converting people who have no political commitment, or may even have sort of like, the average American, capital subject is doesn't really even engage in national politics or local politics or election or anything like that. How do you get that to be, how do you change that, I guess you could say, to make this possible? Because without that happening, we got nothing.
Yeah, I'll start off on this, but I know John can probably add a lot more.
He's nodding his head.
Yeah, I can see John gearing up. I unmuted first. But yeah, I was gonna say like in DSA, like our job is to organize, right? Like we're organizing for a socialist like theory of change. We're organizing for a better world, and specifically as socialists. Something that Red Star kind of calls back to all the time, and we joke that like you'll hear Megan R, the co-chair of DSA National, talk about Marta Harnacker all the time.
About what?
Marta Harnacker. She was a Latin American socialist. She was like a theorist, but also just like someone who's deeply involved in the movement for decades. And she was incredibly prolific. Her writing is kind of exactly like this kind of stuff that you're talking about here. She was engaged at the highest levels of different like governments or like organizations, but all of her writing was oriented towards everyday people, and she was incredibly prolific in that. Like all the books, like half of them are just all bullet points. Like the whole book is bullet points.
One of the biggest problems that the American left has is sound like a bunch of dorks all the time.
Yeah, no, and like she'll have a book on like this is how we did like economic planning, decentralized economic planning, and the whole book is numbered bullet points so that you can like point to and be like, okay, like this is how we read through it. But the point there is like one thing she talks about is that politics is not the like an exercise in just being like, oh, okay, we're gonna figure out what's possible and we're gonna try to do that. Right, politics, and particularly like us as organizers, we're trying to change what is possible, right? Not just looking at like what's in front of us and being like, we just want to be to the left of the middle, but moving people and changing their opinions. And I think a big part of that, to your point about how to meet people where they're at, like you can look at what Bernie did, and people will talk about like Bernie's messaging and Trump's messaging, right, before recently, being like pointing towards real pains and problems in people's lives, rather than like you look at like Joe Biden or the Democrats being like, there are no problems, the economy is fine, right, don't worry about it.
God.
Yeah,
I remember James Carville, like,
go to sleep, like it's fine.
No, not even that. Like, I remember when Joe Biden was like the president, and I was actually, hosting a thing, and he was on it, and it wasn't this show, but it was something else I was doing. But he was there, and like one of the questions that he was asked was like, how do you like change like what Democrats look like or whatever? How do you make it so that like you can actually build power or whatever? And he's like, we just have to celebrate our victories better. And it's like, bro, what victories? Like your compromises on literally everything, the nothing that you always, I mean, sure, like there was some, like there's like little, drops in the bucket or whatever, but like he's basically saying, take these, crumbs and make them seem like they're, they're fine, fine dining, steak dinners or whatever.
Yeah. Make a feast out of these crumbs, right?
Yeah,
James Carville, right after Trump took office, had this like insane New York Times op-ed that was literally like, all we got to do as Democrats is wait for Trump to embarrass himself. So we don't have to do anything.
Which has the double purpose, by the way, and this is intended, no question, of disciplining the people that they view as their sort of like their constituency willing or not, they're basically saying that we're never going to give you anything, but like if you don't vote for a Democrat, then you're just going to have to eat crap for 4 years, and we ain't going to be here to save you.
Yeah, it's just holding people hostage, right? Like that's like the messaging. Like this is like a hostage letter. But yeah, so like I think the role of like you look at like when people were talking about like Bernie and Trump like tapping into this like discontent, right? Where like they're actually pointing out like, hey, these are real problems, and like those are real. It's like we're not going to pretend like they're not happening, and here's a solution, right? And the difference is like one of them, the solution is like racism, right? And like just pointing at all brown people and saying that like these are the problems, versus like Bernie like pointing towards like, okay, like capitalism is the issue, like we have to like the 99% versus the 1%, like that kind of messaging. And I think that is how we get there, right? Like pointing towards, I think of even more recent conversations that have been coming back up because for the recent like ICE escalations, and now like immigrant justice is like much more like in the conversation, right? And in these conversations you can hear like there's a liberal argument that's like, immigrants, we got to protect them because they're valuable, because they're hardworking, because they're willing to take jobs that no one else is, right? That's a real thing that people say, right? Like, look at like America's economy like won't work if like we don't have like immigrants out in
if we don't
fields.
have extremely exploited labor in this country, it doesn't work. That's what the admission is.
Yeah, right. And I think it's our job as socialists, and this is like I think like an example of how you can tie in the internationalism and like raise people's consciousness and kind of plug in to like what's wrong. Is like, hey, like the thing that's wrong is not like that like we need more brown people to work in the fields, right? Like that's not the problem.
Sounds
right?
bad, actually.
Yeah, like you kind of play that out like, do you really mean that? Like I guess you do. That is what you're saying. Like the problem is that like we have this system that exploits people, exploits all workers, but it doesn't exploit all workers evenly either, right? Like this is also like a racialized hierarchy of oppression, and that is tied in with how imperialism works. Like the reason why there are brown people working out in the fields is because the U.S. empire has destroyed their countries and forced them to come here, and even though these working conditions are terrible, they're still like they like destroyed their hometowns, and so they got to go somewhere. Right, like these are where we can draw those conversations, and again, like you're saying, like it's not like a sit down and have a lecture, but like the framing of that matters.
That won't
right?
work.
Yeah, but like the framing of that matters. You can't lead with like, oh, it's because they're hard workers, right? It's like it's because the system is broken and it's blah 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 blah. And like if they have follow-up questions, that's where you pull the direction.
Yeah, and I also think, and again, this is another really important. Like it should be a taught principle as like an organizer, or even just like any good sort of like person pushing a socialist agenda, is maintain composure, for God's sake. Like stop being like sorry that this comes off as like cruel or whatever, but like or whatever it is, but like there needs to be like, if you're going to be instructing people or leading people, you cannot be an unstable personality. You cannot be somebody who is going to like fly off at the handle at somebody, or if you do that, people are going to tune you out or make you a example of everything that's wrong, which I guess I'm kind of doing that a little bit too, like not intentionally. It's just sort of like it's a critique of the state of the American left, and I do think it's a real problem.
Yeah, I follow that too, and I'll say that like it kind of gets at the first piece of socialist lit that I ever read in a Poly 8 group was a point where Marx specifically noted, right, that like the point, if you separate the politics and the economics of what I am bringing up from humans, then you have missed the point, or something like that, essentially, right? Mm-hmm. Like he brought it right back to the point of like, this is not just for better politics, better economies. This is about people. This is about humans. This is about human history. This is about our decisions. This is about how we are living. And so like, that was the thing that like, I think like, that was the thing that made me know like, yeah, I'm in the right place. I know I know as a fact I'm in the right place. But the other side of it, right, was also the key thing of like, you're speaking to a person at their base level, who they are, right? So like if I'm having a conversation, there's two models that I would probably point out underneath this concept of popular education. I think Marta Harnacker does a good job of pinning down some organizing science in socialist ways, because that was something that Megan always challenged me. She's like, John, you bring up this cool stuff, but are there socialist examples of this going on? Because just like you mentioned, right? Like folks on the left will not care about like I'm just gonna be real. They won't care about learning about some organizing science stuff unless it's coming from a socialist, right? Like there are things that people do as part of normal organizing tactics that work because there is a science to it, right? Just like no shortcuts. But the key thing is that like people will overlook it if they don't really trust the source, or they don't feel like this is the right source that it's coming from. Or they're like, oh, that's just some people out here who are doing charity, or folks who, like these would be groups who have been doing like community organizing since the civil rights era, right? And it's like, but it's like if you get into the thing of actually looking at the person when it comes to an individual conversation with folks, I would rather gauge and engage them in a conversation of like, what are the things that you care about? I'll listen to them about that. Like they'll tell you, because people will tell you as you have a conversation with someone. I was talking with somebody the other day, and he was talking about how like he's struggling to like take care of his family, everything else like that is frustrating, but he still loves the city. He still loves New Orleans, right? And it's like and I flipped that and was like, okay, well, yeah, like, and it's kind of crazy because like you look at other places, right? Because like you look at other places, they don't charge you taxes or stuff like that on your home, because they don't want to take your home from you. They want you to have a place where you can live at, right? They don't do this with the intention of predating your home and getting a tax lien on it, right? And like, because like, a difference here for folks who don't know, if you listen in the Northeast, like a lot of folks can be in poverty and still own homes in the South, because like a lot of these may be passed down, or like you're talking like impoverished neighborhoods, other things like that. It's not like the brownstone in Brooklyn. It's like got $1 million price tag on it, right? But like, talking to someone about that and just giving them that hook is the first step to like a larger conversation where we can kind of go back and forth about the things. And he's like, yeah, blah, 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 blah. We kept going and going and going, right? And it's a skill that you can develop for those one-on-one conversations that builds a relationship with someone, but also lets them contribute actively to it. I'm slipping socialist stuff into this conversation throughout all of it. I'm talking about all of these things and giving examples, but I'm not doing it in such a high level theoretical way. But I stopped because I recognized the thing that he cared about. He just wanted to make sure that him, his daughter, and the rest of them, they had a good spot. But like, it'd be difficult. And we went on and up from there. And I would say on the flip side of that, in a more organized environment, a space that I've seen do this when I was facilitating dialogue on race, Louisiana, with the woman who integrated LSU's dorms. The key thing that she would do is she would do a similar thing that is actually pretty much the same science as what Martha Harnacker talks about with popular education, where she would give them the information and let them be in conversation with it and then go about it. But this was a bit more structured. And so I would say those are kind of like two different ways that I've seen it. And like the more you practice it, the better you'll get at communicating it, right? Like I don't need to tell you you're in the precariat. I can like describe what the precariat is. Like I'll talk with you about it and we'll go back and forth about it. You always have an opportunity to engage in a proletarian conversation is how I flip it.
Okay. We do have about 5 minutes left. I know that you have somewhere to go, John, and we have, we're coming up on our time period anyway, but y'all do have a number of proposals that you're putting forward to convention, and also you have an entire slate. Just sort of talk about the proposals and the other folks and where to find information about Red Star.
Yeah, I'll hop in on a few of them and then I'll let Andrew follow me. I'll talk about two of them. So we, outside of writing the convention planning resolution to get the convention planned out, we mostly brought amendments that we've worked with multiple other people on, try to make it a real multi-tendency effort. And so like we tossed out a friendly amendment to one that redoes budgeting and sets up spending frameworks that you can read about for R43. Not R43, but the other one as well. And then we also have one in relation to DSA for multiracial liberation that still tries to bring things together and help us still retain socialists of color and also expand our political expression a bit. And I'll let Andrew follow up too.
Yeah, yeah. So the other amendments that we'll call out here are we have the theme of this is all to have more chapters or members, in the driver's seat. And so we have an amendment on some grievance processes, like a proposal around grievance processes in the organization. This is often, I think, an overlooked area, but like we're saying, like conflict is a conflict of bounds. And so like trying to figure out ways where we can keep those processes of resolving grievances in a member-led fashion, I think are pretty important to us as like a member-led organization. We have some other ones as well, but I think maybe it might be more useful for folks if they're interested to find out all the details. Go to redstarcaucus.org/convention. That'll link to all the language and stuff for a bunch of other proposals as well. And yeah, I'll talk about a little bit about the other folks. So Red Star is running Megan R for co-chair. So that's one of the 2 co-chair positions. That's one election, and then it'll be John, myself, Aditya P from Madison, the Madison area, and then Hazel W, who's also a comrade of mine in San Francisco. We're all running for national leadership as well. So 5 of us in total.
Cool. And you said Red Star, what was it? RedStarDSA.org?
redstarcaucus.org/convention.
Cool. Anything else y'all want to say on the way out? Got 1 minute.
I'll just throw in real quick. Always good. Appreciate you having us on here. And just please, if you're listening to this and you got interested about DSA, just please talk to a DSA member, join up, get with the movement, and let's get it.
Yeah.
All right. Go ahead, Andrew.
No, yeah, I was going to say, there's probably a chapter in your area. And if there aren't, like John was saying, chapters are popping up all across the country. This organization is what we make it. So get involved, talk to a comrade.
All right. Thank you, everybody, for listening. This has been Good Morning Comrade. Thanks. You can listen to us every Saturday at 10 a.m. On WHIVLP New Orleans or anywhere in the world, WHIVFM.org/listen. You can follow me on Twitter at MNMProf or Bluesky as well. And follow the show at Comrade Morning. All of our stuff is at goodmorningcomrade.com. Thank you for listening, everyone. And we love you. Bye-bye.